The cry split the night. High and sharp, it cut through the hymn still trembling on the lips of the congregation. Heads turned, boots scuffed against the wood floor, and every lantern flame inside the church seemed to flicker at once. Outside, on the steps, the wail rose again, carried on the dry wind that always smelled of dust and sagebrush. The preacher stopped mid-prayer. For a long breath, no one moved. Then the door groaned open, spilling lamplight onto the church porch. A child lay swaddled in a sun-faded quilt, small fists beating the air, face red as a brand. Gasps broke. A woman whispered, "Dear Lord." The people surged toward the doorway, murmurs growing like restless cattle. A man in his Sunday coat muttered, "Sin at our very door." Another hissed, "Who'd leave such a thing?" The sheriff's hat brim dipped low, his mouth working, but no words coming. The baby screamed again, louder, the sound desperate enough to splinter hearts. Feet shuffled. Some leaned in, but none bent down. Judgment tangled with pity in the hot silence of the churchyard. A mother clutched her daughter close. A drunk laughed sharp and ugly. Then a shadow moved. From the far edge of the street, where the lamplight thinned into darkness, a figure stepped forward. Tall, shoulders bent from years of work or grief, boots slow against the dust. His hat brim covered most of his face, but every soul in town knew him. The rancher who spoke less than any man alive. He didn't look at the people, nor at the preacher wringing his hands on the threshold. He went straight to the child. The crowd parted, uneasy. Kneeling, he lowered himself until the creak of his leather coat was the only sound besides the crying. For a moment, he just looked. His face was unreadable, worn by sun and silence. Then he leaned close. No one heard the words. It was only a murmur, softer than a prayer, breathed against the child's ear. The baby stilled, the fists unclenched, the mouth closed, and the small body slackened into quiet. A hush swept the yard, so deep the night wind whistling through the eaves felt like thunder. Women crossed themselves. Men shifted, muttering. The preacher whispered, "Mercy." The rancher stood. He held the baby against his chest, as if it had always been meant to be there. "Now see here," a shopkeeper barked, his voice brittle. "You can't just—" The rancher's eyes lifted. Cold, pale, they cut sharper than any blade. The shopkeeper swallowed his words. The widow near the back, black veil still clinging to her hair though her husband had been in the ground near a year, watched with a strange tightness in her chest. She'd seen those eyes once before, long ago, when the man had not been only a rancher, but something more dangerous. Around them, the murmurs grew. "Why him? Strange business. Mark my words, no good'll come of it." But no one stepped forward to take the child. The rancher didn't speak. He turned, boots dragging a low rhythm in the dirt, and started down steps. His coat brushed against the preacher's sleeve, and the old man flinched as if touched by a ghost. The town watched him walk into the night, the small bundle against his chest, the sound of his spurs fading until the desert swallowed them. For a long while, the people stayed gathered, staring at the empty steps. The lamp above the church door swung on its chain, creaking with each gust of wind. Some muttered prayers, others curses. No one dared follow. At last the preacher said, "Go home," but his voice trembled. The widow lingered. She kept her eyes on the dark where the man had gone, heart drumming like hooves on hard earth. Something old and dangerous had shifted in the bones of the town. She could feel it as sure as the desert wind against her skin. She drew her shawl tight and turned toward her lonely house. Behind her, the baby's cry no longer echoed, but in her ears it still rang, not as sorrow, but as the start of a tale no soul could yet reckon. The baby would not stop crying. Goats bleated in their pen, horses stamped restless, and the wind rattled the tin roof until it seemed the whole ranch quaked with the sound. The rancher held her steady against his chest, rocking in silence, jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. His hands, rough from rope and branding iron, were clumsy with the small bundle. Lantern light threw his shadow long across the barn wall. The child wailed again, sharp and piercing, as if demanding the world listen. The door creaked. A figure stepped inside. The widow, black shawl drawn tight against the cold, eyes sharp as she crossed the straw-littered floor. She said nothing at first, only watched him, the way his shoulders hunched over the child like a man trying to shield fire from wind. "You'll wear yourself out," she said finally. He didn't answer. She took a step closer. The baby's face was red, the tiny fist shaking in fury. With a slow, practiced motion, the widow reached out. He hesitated, then let the child into her arms. At once the crying softened, then broke into hiccups. The widow rocked her, humming under her breath. The rancher's eyes lowered, unreadable. "You've never done this before," she said. He shook his head once. The goat bleated again. The widow moved to the corner where a jug of milk waited. She filled a small bottle, placed it to the child's lips, and watched her drink. In the silence, the only sound was the greedy suckle of the infant and the low breath of the man standing like a statue near the stall. "You can't do this alone," she whispered. His gaze flicked to hers, sharp warning. She met it without fear. "I don't mean I'll speak of it to others, but the town already whispers. You know it. I hear them." The rancher turned away, pulling his hat lower. His silence was answer enough. Outside, the coyotes howled. By morning, the talk filled every corner of town. At the mercantile, a man like that raising a babe? Ain't natural. At the saloon, mark me, he's hiding something. You don't just take a child like that unless you got reason to keep folks from asking. At the church, maybe God set that child at the steps for him. Or maybe the devil did. The widow heard every word. She carried her basket through the street with her chin high, though her heart twisted at the bitterness behind each whisper. The sun beat down on the roofs, and dust swirled around her skirts. On the porch of the saloon, 3 cowhands leaned against a post, spitting tobacco and muttering. "Bet he don't last a month with it. Bet the kid don't last the week." Their laughter followed her down the road. She gripped her basket tighter. That evening she found herself again at the ranch. The air smelled of dry hay and horse sweat. The rancher was at the fence, hammering a board back into place. The child lay swaddled in a basket nearby, kicking and cooing. The widow stood at the edge of the yard. "They'll tear you apart with words," she said. The hammer struck once more, echoing across the barren hills. He set it down, turned, and looked at her. His silence carried more weight than any speech. The widow stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I've seen the way you move, how you watch the horizon before anyone else. You've done more than ranching." His jaw tightened. "You can't hide forever," she said. The baby stirred, whimpering. The rancher went to her at once, lifting her with surprising gentleness. He murmured something low, words too soft for the widow to catch. The whimpering stopped. She shivered. Not from the wind, but from the way that sound stilled the child like magic. Days bled into weeks. The town's whispers grew. Dust storms rolled through, lashing the buildings until shutters rattled and sand stung the eyes. Inside their homes, people muttered his name as though it carried both curse and warning. The widow saw him often, always working in silence, always with the child nearby. She watched the way his hands, so steady with rope and rifle, grew steady, too, with feeding, rocking, soothing. The quiet between them became something heavy, almost holy. But the air in town was changing. One night in the saloon, voices rose. "Gangs been seen in the canyons. Riders, 6 at least. Maybe more. They'll want coin food, maybe worse." The sheriff sat slumped in the corner, nursing his drink, offering nothing but a grunt. Fear spread quick, faster than whiskey. The widow left before the fight broke out. On the boardwalk, the air felt charged like before storm. She pulled her shawl close and glanced toward the dark hills where the rancher's lantern glowed faintly in the distance. Some said he was cursed, others said blessed, but she knew something the town did not. The way his eyes measured danger before it showed. The way his silence cut deeper than words. The way a locked chest sat heavy in his barn, never touched, never opened. She pressed her lips tight. If the storm coming was what she feared, that chest would not stay closed forever. The saloon doors slammed wide as riders spilled in, spurs clanging, guns swinging loose in the lamplight. Men leapt back from their tables, whiskey sloshing, cards scattering to the floor. The leader strode through the wreckage, long coat snapping like a whip, scar tearing across his jaw, eyes burning with cruelty. He slammed his pistol down on the bar. "Whiskey, now!" The barkeep's hand shook so hard the bottle clinked against the glass. His men spread out, knocking chairs aside, laughing too loud, boots hammering across the floorboards. One dragged the piano player by the collar, shoved him to the keys. A broken tune banged out, sour and jagged. The sheriff stood near the door, pale, hat pulled low. His hand twitched toward the iron at his hip, then fell back. He said nothing. The outlaw leader grinned, showing teeth like a wolf. "Fine town you got here. Shame if it burned." His voice cut sharp, carrying to every corner. "You'll give us food, coin, whatever else we fancy. And when I say it's enough, maybe I'll let your church keep standing." Silence. Only the pianos stumble and the harsh laugh of men drunk on fear. From the back, a woman cried out. One of the riders had cornered her, yanking her shawl. "Heard there's a babe round here," he jeered. "Left on a church step. Sweet little thing. Be worth something on the road." The saloon stiffened. Faces turned away, shame mixing with terror. The widow, standing in the doorway, froze. Her breath caught hard in her throat. The blood in her veins turned ice. The outlaw leader turned, eyes narrowing. "That true," the sheriff mumbled, stammering, but the sound died in his throat. The leader slammed his boot on the bar rail. "Then bring it out. We'll see if the brat cries for coin." Laughter. Spit hit the floorboards. The widow backed into the night, heart hammering. Dust whirled down the street, the moon sharp against the rooftops. She clutched her shawl and ran. The ranch was dark, but for one lantern swinging by the barn. She burst through the gate, skirts torn by the posts. He was there, hammer in hand, driving nails into the fence. The child slept in her basket beside him, the night air cool against her face. "They know," the widow gasped. "The gang." The hammer stopped. "They want her. They'll take her." The rancher's head lifted slow, his eyes fixed on the horizon, the faint glow of lanterns from town, the sound of distant shouts carrying through the dry air. The widow's voice shook. "You can't fight them. Not as you are now. You swore." He dropped the hammer. The clang rang out across the yard. Without a word, he strode to the barn. The widow followed, trembling, her breath catching in the shadows. He went to the corner, where a chest sat heavy beneath dust and cobweb. For a long moment, he stood over it, the silence deep enough to hear the child's steady breath. Then he knelt, dragged it out, and lifted the lid. The widow's eyes widened. Inside lay steel polished by years of use. A rifle wrapped in oiled cloth, a revolver marked by notches along the grip, a knife honed to a cruel edge. And beneath them, folded with reverence, the tattered blue of a Union uniform, metal still pinned though dulled by time. The rancher rested a hand on the cloth, fingers trembling only once before curling into a fist. The widow's throat tightened. "So it's true. You were." He said nothing. He lifted the rifle, checked the chamber, slid the barrel with the ease of a man who had never forgotten. The sound of metal clicked sharp, final. The widow clutched the basket, pulling the child close. "If you do this," his eyes cut to hers. They burned with the silence of a man who had already chosen. The child stirred, whimpering. He leaned down, murmured low, words too soft to hear. The whimper stilled. The widow shivered. By dawn the town was waiting. The gang had gathered in the square, horses stamping, guns gleaming in the weak light. Smoke drifted from the saloon windows where bottles still burned in the ash of the night's wreckage. The leader sat high in his saddle, coat snapping in the wind. His men jeered, firing shots into the air, their laughter sharp enough to cut. The townsfolk huddled at the edges, eyes cast down. The sheriff stood pale and sweating, useless as a broken gate. The leader spat in the dust. "Where's the babe? Bring her out, or we burn this whole place down." Silence stretched, brittle as glass. Then spurs rang against the hard earth. The rancher walked into the square. Alone, rifle in one hand, revolver at his hip, hat brim shadowing his eyes. The wind caught his coat, flaring it wide, and dust swirled around his boots like smoke. He didn't speak. The outlaw leader grinned wide. Well, Thought you'd hide behind your barn. Looks like we got ourselves a show. He drew his pistol, spun it once. But one man against us? You'll be dead before you blink. The rancher stood still, silent, eyes fixed, waiting. The townsfolk shifted, whispers rising like the hiss of snakes. The widow held the baby close in the shadows of the church steps, heart beating so loud she thought the whole street could hear it. The outlaw leader laughed, raising his gun. The storm had come. The street went still. No dogs barked. No children cried. Only the hiss of wind dragging dust across the boards, rattling shutters against tired walls. The rancher stood in the center of it, rifle hanging loose at his side, revolver ready at his hip. Across from him, the outlaw leader grinned. You come alone. Fool's choice. His men laughed, guns glinting in the dawn. The widow held the baby in the church doorway, her fingers white around the quilt. She felt every heartbeat slam against her ribs. The outlaw leader raised his hand. Kill him. Gunfire split the morning. The rancher moved. Not wild, not desperate, precise, exact, the way a soldier cuts through chaos with years burned into his bones. His rifle cracked once, twice, each shot snapping like thunder. 2 riders toppled, boots catching in stirrups, dragged screaming through the dust. Another outlaw rushed forward. The rancher dropped the rifle, drew his revolver smooth as breath, and fired. The man spun backward, gun clattering. The square filled with smoke and echo. Horses reared, screaming. Bullets tore splinters from the hitching posts. The townsfolk dove for cover, faces pressed into dirt. Still, he did not speak. Every step he took was measured, boots heavy, coat whipping in the wind. He fired again, each bullet striking true, no wasted motion. A man tried to flank him from the livery. The rancher's knife flashed, spinning through the air, sinking deep into the outlaw's chest. The silence of his fight was more terrifying than any shout. The gang cursed, yelled, screamed, but he answered with nothing but steel and fire. The widow, clutching the baby, forced herself to move. A rider broke from the fray, galloping toward the church, torch in hand. She grabbed a fallen pistol from the dirt, aimed with shaking hands, and fired. The shot cracked wild, but enough to spook the horse. The outlaw toppled, crushed under his own mount. Her hands trembled, smoke curling from the barrel. She bit her lip until it bled, but her eyes stayed fixed on the child in her arms. The gang thinned, fear setting in. Men backed toward their saddles, shoving at each other, desperate to flee. The leader snarled, eyes burning. He leveled his pistol at the rancher. You think silence makes you strong? You're just a ghost in rags. The rancher stepped closer, dust swirling around his boots. His revolver pointed steady, hand unmoving. The leader fired first. The bullet ripped past, splintering wood. The rancher's shot followed, clean, brutal, striking the leader's shoulder. The man dropped to his knees, gun clattering to the dirt. Blood spread dark against his coat. Breathing ragged, he looked up, defiance trembling. Do it. Finish me. The rancher loomed over him. The square was silent, every soul watching. The leader spat blood, sneered. Kill me, or they'll never fear you. For a long moment, the world held its breath. The revolver hung in the rancher's grip, steady, ready. Then, slow as the turning of the sun, he lowered it. He bent close. His lips moved, a murmur softer than dust on the wind. No one heard the words, but the man on his knees. The outlaw's face changed. His eyes widened, then broke. He dropped his head, shoulders sagging, as if the whisper alone had stripped him of everything. The rancher stepped back. The leader knelt in the dirt, alive, broken. His men fled into the desert, riding hard, never looking back. The town stayed still, the echo of silence louder than gunfire. The widow clutched the child tight, tears burning her eyes. She whispered, "It's over," though her voice shook. The rancher holstered his revolver, turned away, and walked through the dust. He did not raise his head. He did not take glory. He did not speak. The people stared. Some crossed themselves. Others whispered of curses, of angels, of a man carved from stone. None dared approach. He reached the church steps. The baby stirred in the widow's arms, whimpered once. The rancher leaned close, brushed a hand against her cheek, and murmured again. The whimper faded to calm. The widow's heart pounded. She wanted to ask what he said, what secret bound his silence, what weight he carried from the war. But his eyes told her no answer would ever come. He turned, boots crunching across the street, and disappeared into the pale light, back toward the lonely hills. The townsfolk gathered in hushed voices, staring at the blood drying in the dust, the outlaw broken and muttering where he knelt. They would speak of this day until their graves. And years later, when children sat around fires and asked about the rancher, the old widow would tell them, "He saved us with no boast, no shout, no prayer, just silence, and a murmur soft enough to still both babe and killer." That's how you know it was real. That's how you know it was legend.